All right. Good morning, colleagues, friends, scholars, partners, and participants. Good morning to you for joining us from around the world. And on behalf of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center at the University of Ibadan, I'd like to welcome you all to the inaugural edition of our monthly seminar series. The ADRRC, that's the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center, is a joint initiative of the Diaspora and Transnational Studies Program at the University of Ibadan, Institute of African Studies, and then the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. The center is also a TED Fund Center of Excellence for Diaspora Studies and is dedicated to advancing cutting-edge research, policy engagement, and capacity building on African diaspora and transnational issues. And our work sits at the intersection of scholarship, of policy, and of practice. And we aim to bridge academic inquiry with real-world migration and diaspora dynamics. So this seminar series is part of our broader intellectual agenda to create a sustained platform for rigorous engagement on pressing questions of migration, identity, belonging, and global interconnectedness, particularly how the global Nigerian diaspora is connected to all of this. So today's inaugural seminar is titled The Nigerian Diaspora in Manchester, A History of Migrations and Identity in a Global World. And the ADRC is honored to host Professor Olutayo Adesina, who is a distinguished historian, and his work has contributed to our understanding of economic history, migration histories, identity formation, and global African experiences. So, but before we proceed, let me briefly outline the structure of today's session. So, the director of the center, Professor Shenayo Olaoluwa, will begin with an opening remark, very brief opening remark, and this will be followed by the introduction of our presenter, after which Professor Adesina will deliver his talk for about 45 minutes. Then we'll go ahead to proceed with question and answer. But please note that we strongly encourage participants to submit their questions via the Zoom chat comment session. And then Rukayat, our doctoral fellow, who's also going to be online, will be monitoring the chat and will read out questions to speakers when the time comes. We'll take few live questions if time permits, but the priority will be given to questions submitted in the chat to ensure broader participation. So at this point, it's my pleasure to invite the director of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center, Professor Shenayo Olaoluwa, to give his opening remark. Prof, you can step in now.
Thank you very much, Dr. Adebayo. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to welcome us to this historic edition of the seminar series at the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center, which is a TED Fund Center of Excellence for Diaspora Studies at the University of Ibadan, as mediated by the Institute of African Studies. As said earlier on by my colleague, Dr. Adebayo, this is what we are witnessing today is a product of multi-year partnership with the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission. As a matter of fact, because it dates back to at least over 10 years, the partnership even predates the Nigerians in Diaspora Commission because it has had, so to say, a series of precursors. But in all this, one figure has been constant at the partnership level outside the University of Ibadan, and that is Honorable Abike Dabiri-Erewa, who has been consistent in pushing together for us how we may advance research in the investigation of not just Nigerian diaspora, but the African diaspora on a global scale. A couple of years ago, precisely in 2023, we were able to record an incredible achievement when the Nigerian Tertiary Education Fund gave a positive response to our proposal for the establishment of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center. And the takeoff grant is for the construction of an office complex. And I'm pleased to inform you that we are in the lintel stage, and more funds have been released for its completion. At the level of research, we have also been able to receive an initial takeoff grant, part of which has facilitated the inauguration of this seminar series today. As we proceed, it is projected to be a monthly series. There will also be other activities in a similar vein, and we will continue to keep everybody posted. Specifically now to the lecture today, it is a rare privilege for us to have a distinguished Professor Olutayo Adesina honor us by accepting to give this talk. Since the commencement of my graduate program at the University of Ibadan, Professor Olutayo has remained a very firm and consistent mentor who I can remember together with Professor ADRRC Raju, at some point paid me a visit while I was on my PhD in South Africa, just to be sure that, hey, this boy is serious. He's not just in South Africa without any focus. So I'm so grateful to you for this. And it happened again that when I returned to Nigeria to pick up a job, he was right on the interview panel and scored me favorably at the Osun State University. And ever since, I eventually traced him down to the University of Ibadan. He's always been an incredible, supportive and protective mentor. And it just happens that we're also here again today. It is not by any accident, because we know he's always supported us institutionally and individually. So today, it's going to be an incredible talk on the history of the Nigerian diaspora in Manchester. And I would like to once again invite all of us, welcome us at the same time, and say we are in for a very productive time, and we will not be disappointed as Professor Adesina takes us through what I will call an otherwise illegible history in the mapping of the Nigerian diaspora. Thank you very much and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. My director, good morning. It's nice to be here. I'm actually very honored to be here to give the inaugural lecture of your distinguished center. May I be allowed to share my screen now?
Prof, before you proceed to that, I would like to welcome you properly.
Okay.
To introduce you. So, of course, before then, I'd like to thank Prof. for the opening remark and then for setting the tone for this important conversation. So, it's my honor to introduce our speaker, Professor Olutayo Adesina. Olutayo Adesina is a history professor at the University of Ibadan, specializing in economic history and social history of West Africa and the history of development. Adesina, whose works have decentered European perspectives within the intellectual culture of the Ibadan School of History, currently holds the British Academy Global Professorship of History in the Department of History, School of Arts, Languages and Cultures at the University of Manchester, United Kingdom. A distinguished fellow of the Nigerian Academy of Letters, the highest body of humanistic scholars in Nigeria. Professor Adesina has taught at the University of Ibadan for over 30 years. He is an alumnus of Obafemi Awolowo University, Ile-Ife, Nigeria. He recently co-edited with Akomuji Adebayo and Rashid Owoyele Ajetumobi the book Nigeria, History, Society, and Social Change in the 21st Century, published by Bloomsbury Academic 2006. Welcome, Professor Olutayo. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. Let me share my PowerPoint so I can introduce this subject very well.
Yes.
Okay, is it
yes,
okay? Can you see?
Yes, we can see
okay.
it now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, I thank Professor Senayo, the director, for founding me worthy, well in learning and character, to deliver the inaugural ADRRC monthly seminar series. And it's my pleasure to actually do so for several reasons. I am happy to contribute to the work you are doing at this center. And of course, wherever there is the need to advance knowledge, I am always very happy to be there. So my topic for today is the Nigerian diaspora in Manchester, a history of migrations. And look at my migrations in plural, history of migrations and identity in a global world. Well, I am in Manchester for a different reason. As a British Academy Global Professor of History, I'm here to work on the town and gown interface, the social decolonization of knowledge in Ibadan. But of course, knowledge is not always in a cocoon. It is so interwoven, so integrated that, of course, you have to understand the dimensions of knowledge. And that's why I have also found myself working somehow on the Nigerian diaspora in Manchester. So when I got here, I was going to work on a local project at a small level in the department beyond the larger one that brought me here. So I was going to work on the town and gown interface, the Nigerian community and the University of Manchester. But as I went into that project, I discovered that the materials I came across had gone beyond what the town and gown interface in Manchester would be able to absorb. So I decided, one, to widen the scope, and two, to keep it in view as a large future project. So what I'm giving you this morning is just a small overview of what I am trying to do with that project. And so I thank Professor Senayo for giving me the opportunity. And of course, I also thank Professor Zimbine of NISA for allowing me to also sit in on a prior program, which happened on Tuesday, 28th of April. on a six-continent survey of Nigerian professionals in policy measures for harnessing contributions to national development. It was a very well-organized program. And of course, I took home some points from my attendance of the program, and that is also going to form a small critique of what I'm going to say here today. And so by way of introduction, I would say this is a compelling exploration of the history of the Nigerian diaspora in Manchester. I think apart from London, the highest population of Nigerians can be found in Manchester. You find everybody on the bus or in the streets speaking Nigerian languages. And of course, you will know that this is another home for Nigerians. The contact with Manchester began with mercantilist, commercial, and colonial pursuits in Nigeria. So it's not a recent phenomenon. Manchester developed an extensive commercial and mercantile interest in Nigeria through the 19th century. And one of the firms that participated in the Nigerian trade, at this time, I'm not going to go back as far as the slave trade. We know how wide that topic is. And so I'm taking that off the table right away. And so focusing on the period of colonial rule, which is more manageable. And so throughout 19th century, a mercantile firm, Liverpool and Manchester Trading Company also participated in Nigerian commerce. In actual fact, it was one of the leading trading firms before being acquired by Sir Tubman Goldie and his national African company. And so if you then want to understand Manchester in perspective or Nigeria in perspective, there is no way you can talk about Nigeria without talking about Manchester, or talk about Manchester without talking about Nigeria. They are very they're like Siamese twins actually. And so Manchester-Nigeria relations is not only strategically important, but also evocative of the high caliber relationship that we would love to see. And it's a visibility that strengthens the faith and resilience of Nigerians at home and beyond their borders. Of course, Nigerians will see and remember that you are either a fan of Man City or Man U. And in fact, when I was coming to Manchester, people were starting to envy me that I would be watching Man U live. But of course, the almighty pound will not allow you to just go anywhere you want like that, because if you are spending £100 to go and watch a match, you know the significance. But it's good. I know my compatriots played for them. My compatriots like watching them. My compatriots support them. And so that in itself has its own history. But it's also part of the diaspora stories, because Nigerians also stayed in Manchester to play for Man U or Man City. And so historical understanding, cultural relations, and knowledge exchange between Nigeria and Manchester have been shaped by the contours of experience over time. At times when you talk about the contours of experience, it's not unilinear, it's not straightforward, it's so interwoven that you begin to see the different contours and different layers to understand the kind of relationship that existed. And so in the process, I began to disentangle phases of migration as I saw it. It might not be necessarily right. In history, there is no total history. And that's why we have your own conclusion being revised or being seen from a different perspective by another historian. But from my own look of things, the phases of migration that I've been able to see in Manchester through some of the documents I have used include the frontier phase, which come down from the late 19th century up to the 1940s. Then, of course, there is another phase starting from 1940s to 1960. And then, of course, we have the contemporary phase. Well, I was listening to the man who was at the NISA program who came from NITCOM saying, oh, students are not regarded as part of the diaspora. But, well, that's also debatable because we have a large percentage of Nigerians here. Whether you like it or not, they are here, many of them for 3 years, for 4 years. Yes, their school fees are being paid from home in some cases, but in many cases also, they don't see their home until after 3, 4 years. So it's something that we would like to see and then try to understand who is actually a member of the diaspora. I am here now for 3, 4 years. Am I a member of the diaspora? So these are issues that must be debated in future. But the important thing is, where do we stand in this research? As I've said, it's an exploratory work, so we don't expect to find an earth-shaking conclusion yet. It's still an exploratory work to see in which direction we can take this work in the next couple of years. It seeks to look at the historical bonds between Nigeria and Manchester. But this study is also beyond that. It is a preliminary investigation that will be used as the frame for a larger, more expansive and sustainable work. In other words, it's a work designed for the future. The scope is so wide, the reach is so wide, the depth is so wide. But in all that, we cannot have what you call a total history. And that's why you do your bit and leave the rest for somebody to take another subject that will continue where you stopped from. So it seeks to understand a path that has not been fully explored. Well, I'm saying that advisedly because there have been materials on Manchester, Nigeria, or Nigerians in Manchester. But there is a way in which the articulation and aggregation of certain works will allow you to see things holistically, which is what I am trying to do. Let us begin to look at it holistically rather than take one strand and then look at it. Because the strand taken by NISA was about the Nigerian professionals, which is good, which is okay. But at times when you study history, if you adopt a particular approach, it defines the conclusion that you are going to get or the richness of that conclusion. And so for me, it seeks to understand the part that has not been fully explored from a historical sense. That is larger, even though primary and secondary materials exist on the subject. But bear it in mind that this is an ongoing process that tries to gather background information, analyze the sources and resources available to prosecute the work, and then later go into a more structured research. So why is this work significant? They will tell you, oh, well, but we have materials all over the place. Why are you doing this work? Is it significant? Well, this one is significant for several reasons. I'm happy to say it's going to be a modest, even though major contribution to diaspora studies in significant ways. It is also designed to give an understanding of the triumphs and triumphs of Nigerian migrants. I have seen documents, and then from there, I could see the experiences of Nigerians in Manchester, the good, the bad, the ugly, so it will also highlight the strategies of survival, because living in the UK itself is survival. So strategies of survival undertaken by Nigerian migrants and their contributions to the host community. So it's not a one-way street. We take, we give. It will also contribute to a better understanding of the Nigerian condition. And when I talk about the Nigerian condition, from the documents I have seen, from the documents I have read, you also begin to understand why Nigerians are living. Or if some go back, why they go back. So it's a two-way street also. It's not about Manchester alone. From what you see from the migration stories here, you also begin to understand the Nigerian condition, which also goes a long way to help the country to appreciate its own trajectory, successes and failures. And so through that, help put in place a grand strategy that will realign the Nigerian diaspora with their nation's developmental trajectory. Yes, now Nigerian diaspora has been put in place as part of the trajectory for Nigeria's developmental strategy. But is that all? Is that all? Because at times you need more than mainstreaming a particular line of understanding to building a larger one. And the larger one I'm talking about is a grand strategy. Is the Nigerian diaspora part of the Nigerian grand strategy? And in any case, the question you ask is, what is Nigeria's grand strategy? We are always very happy to say, oh, remittances. But is the remittances the be all and end all of everything we have to say about diaspora? It is the Nigerian grand strategy that will rejig our need for the Nigerian diaspora to do more. So it is a truism that Nigerian government is now mindful of the diaspora's necessary role in advancing Nigerian development. But this must be understood beyond remittances. This raises the question, who is conducting the cost-benefit analysis? That is, loss of our professionals versus remittances. There is so much work to be done for us to advance as a nation, and some people must be taking note of what has to be done. Are we getting enough remittances to rebuild our hospitals when there are no drugs, no doctors, the structures are gone, yet remittances are coming in every day? So let somebody or let a group be doing the cost-benefit analysis of what we gain and what we are losing by losing our professionals to the diaspora. And so as part of the significance, from the standpoint of human society, migration is regarded not only as fundamental to human experience, but also as one of the greatest forces shaping human history. It shapes how we live. So we're interested in how Nigerians in Manchester live, how they walk, how they move, how they relate with others, and how they organize their lives. These are part of what we are interested in, so that it serves as a kind of lesson for Nigerians, and of course, an understanding of what Nigerians are coping with in a foreign land. So the story of Nigerian migration in Manchester is situated within a geographical and historical framework. That's what would define this work. It's going to move beyond the immediate needs of using the diaspora for a particular thing. Let's have a larger understanding, a holistic understanding of what the diaspora is, what it's capable of doing, how it has been doing, and in what ways we can leverage that diaspora to actually rebuild relations between Nigeria and UK, or rebuild Nigeria itself. So this project responds to the fact that Manchester has been home to a large Nigerian population in the northwest of England. This has also produced a context in which the Nigerian element has become quite significant. Nigerians are a proud people, and they are happy to identify as Nigerians. And it's one of the things that we are going to study to see, yes, you live in the UK, how have you remained Nigerian at heart? It's a very important for us. So on methodology, this will depend on archival, digital records, oral sources, conventional books, and articles, and several other sources. So it's what we do in history. So, but what is different about this work? Nigeria has a substantial scientific diaspora comprising communities of professionals, researchers, and scientists. I am particularly interested in the history of migration, community participation. I mean, if you see what things Nigerians have done here, you will be amazed. Commerce, there are Nigerian shops, there are Nigerian enterprises bringing goods from here to Nigeria and bringing goods from Nigeria to this place. So it's a very, very robust relationship. We are interested in inclusivity. Nigerians are the margins of society, or they are integrated to the society. Many of them hold high political offices. In fact, even since 1950s, 1940s, 1950s, 60s. So these are the kind of things we have to see and try to rebuild our understanding of the Nigerian diaspora beyond the criminal that has now taken over the larger image of Nigerians around the world. So we are interested in cultural connection, seeing equal social treatment, understanding fair development, and even the environment generally. So from that, we hope to gain novel insights, not only into the human diaspora, but also into the flora, fauna, and objects from the homeland that form part of the diaspora. So that's one of the ways in which this work is going to be different. At times when you look at the human diaspora alone, you are likely to miss a larger picture of what Nigeria means to the outside world, of what the Nigerian diaspora has in its kitty as part of its own trajectory of human progress. These objects in themselves form a sizable diaspora with clear insights into biodiversity and cultural heritage. You want to see this separately, but I want to see it together with the human diaspora. I have gone into the Manchester Museum and I've seen some of the materials for biomedicine listed from the 19th century in their museum. So, which means some of them even came before the human diaspora. But those who were in Nigeria at that point, once they use our herbs and it works for them, they come back to the UK with the herbs. And so some of them have left this for the Manchester Museum with instructions of how to use these herbs. And you'll be amazed that the Europeans who came to Nigeria actually believed in our local traditional medicine. It's amazing. The evidences are there in the museum. And so what materials are available for this study? Well, the materials are the Manchester Central Library Archives, owned by the Manchester City Council, include Nigerian diaspora archival materials, which contain oral histories, photographs, immigrant documents, and personal objects documenting Nigerians who migrated to Manchester between the 1940s and the 1960s. Well, I am sure your center will come into an agreement later on to also migrate some of these materials, have copies there, because the way things are going now, it's becoming difficult to get visas to go outside to go and conduct materials. So we must also leverage our knowledge and understanding of how we can share some of the resources that are there. But one sad thing that I've also just noticed is rather than take some of these materials home, for the use of our students and compatriots. Some countries are continuing to donate their materials to museums here. A textile company in Ghana folded up and then brought all its documents, donated its documents to a museum in Manchester. We must begin to recalibrate our understanding of what intellectualism is all about what society is all about what we seek to gain from teaching the coming generation about the past. So the University of Manchester Library also has documents at the Ahmed Iqbal Ulare Center, which include Nigerian and Pan-African Congress collections, African Diaspora Community Archives, Greater Manchester. Then there are documents available at the People's History Museum in Manchester. That is where I found files on Thomas Bangala. It's a very, very rich file on a diaspora Nigerian. And then, of course, there are objects deposited at the Manchester Museum. The objects here link Nigerian communities to museum objects and archival records. So it's not too neat to focus on the human without bringing all this together to understand the total Nigerian. Of course, and that also allows you to understand the Nigerian psyche, because he's also happy to have these things around him. He wants also to understand what he has around him. And then, of course, the older generation will take the younger ones to the museum to say, this is from Ibadan, this is from Kano. So even without living here, some of these materials are becoming useful to the Nigerians, although some of the materials are going to have to be repatriated home, because in the Manchester Museum, there is a very solid elephant tusk that was taken from the palace of the Oba of Benin. And so discussions are on now on how to also return that elephant tusk. Very robust, beautiful tusk. And so it's in the Manchester Museum. And so there are also private and family archives. We are getting materials. And then, of course, web and oral sources. And of course, there are secondary sources. Nigerian migration history is preserved through secondary sources. There are confirmed Nigerian migration history books in Manchester. There are some academic books on Nigerian migration to the UK, some theses, early theses and sociological studies, and locally curated archival booklet projects. These include Ayobasi Indem's Negro Immigrants in Manchester, published in 1953. There is Don Harris' 30 Blacks in British Education, Hopes, Frustration, and Achievements. This book treats about 5 Nigerians who came into Manchester, Liverpool, and it's a rich source of the Nigerian diaspora. Then, of course, you have David Olusoga's Black British, A Forgotten History. Olusoga himself is from Nigeria, well, he's British, and he's with us in the Department of History at Manchester University. He has also done a lot to understand Black and British. So there is also Joy Ogbemudia's The Migration of Professional Women from Nigeria to the UK, published in 2022. Newspapers have also contributed substantial information. And when I say substantial, I'm talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly on the Nigerian diaspora. In fact, you don't want to read some of the ugly stories on the Nigerian diaspora, but we are historians, we must tell it. And it's really very formidable. You know? So there are also materials from associations and clubs. The Nigerian diaspora here is very strong. And so they have their associations and clubs. So they have programs, pamphlets, materials, and their stories have come out in local newspapers here. And so they are also very useful for anyone seeking to understand the Nigerian migration. But here I must commend the Igbo group, which has a very, very solid association in Manchester. And then, of course, yearly they have their festivals, and it's really, really, really very robust. Well, the other good groups are trying. Younger clubs are there, younger associations are there also that take care of young Nigerians. So they have their own materials, they have their own narratives that have proved very useful for the reconstruction of the Nigerian migration. So Nigerians in Manchester, 2 censuses. It is very important to know how the Nigerian diaspora in Manchester is situated. Of course, there is Manchester City itself, then there is Greater Manchester. These are other small towns or fairly big towns around Manchester. So all of them come together as Greater Manchester. So Nigerians are in Manchester City. They are also spread all over the Greater Manchester. So what is the population of these Nigerians that we are talking about? It's a little bit difficult to now give an exact figure of the population of diasporic Nigerians in Manchester. The reasons are very clear. Even if you have official census today, you begin to see that because of the fluidity of movement, some will leave, some will come. It might be difficult to actually know the number of Nigerians. But even in the census taken by Manchester, there are those who identify themselves as Nigerians born in Nigeria. But there are also others who identify themselves as Nigerians born in the UK. So at times, some of them identify themselves as such, but in other cases, since they were born in the UK, they no longer have the Nigerian identity, although they are Nigerian heritage, but they still retain that heritage through their parents, but not through the Nigerian passport. But now some of them are beginning to have Nigerian passport, especially when the dual citizenship is now allowed. But the dual citizenship is also going to come under serious stress now with what is happening all over the world, with the US, trying to disparage those who come from outside. Of course, another political party here says once it wins the election, it will cancel some of the policies in place. So the world is in a great flux. And that's why now we also have to begin to understand how our country must leverage the diaspora identity to rebuild our country so that we all have a home to come back to. We cannot continue to escape from the country every day. And I have seen from records, Nigerians who came here made good and then went back home. Some of them have established industries. Some of them have established enterprises. That's the kind of thing that we have seen from records here. So we have 2 figures that we can play with in understanding Nigerians in Manchester. There is the official census by the Manchester Council, and there is the figure that was given by the chairman of the Nigerian community in Greater Manchester. So the official figure has shown changes in demography over time. The 2021 census in Manchester revealed that the Nigerian population between 2011 and 2021 increased by 9.7%. From around, that's the general Manchester figure, sorry. The general Manchester figure moved from 503,100 in 2011 to around 551,900 in 2021. But in this census, Nigeria trailed Pakistan, which means there are more Pakistanis here than Nigerians. Nigeria trailed Pakistan as the country with the largest immigrant population in Manchester. But how many of these were counted as Nigerians? The number of people identified as Nigerians born in Nigeria coming from outside rose from 6,400, this is in official documents, 6,400 in 2011. That's 1.3% of the local population. It rose to 10,300 in 2021. That's 1.9%. And between 2021 and 2026, only God knows how many people would have, relocated to Manchester. And so that's the way things are. We can't have a fairly reliable figure yet because no recent census has been undertaken. But all that we know is that the Nigerian population here has risen significantly, astronomically since then. And so let's see what the Nigerian chairman said. The chairman of the Nigerian community, Greater Manchester, Alhaji Abiola Kumoye, in 2024, this is even the 2024 figure. I don't know how they arrived at it, but maybe they have compiled figures belonging to different associations. But he said in 2024, there are 200,000 Nigerians in Manchester in 2024. So if you can do an extrapolation, look at the condition back home, look at the number of visas granted, how many Nigerians do we now have in Manchester? That's a jump question, and so it's really giving us one, how accommodating Manchester is, and two, how adventurous Nigerians are leaving their country to explore other places. So these are things that we have to consider. And so it's also not going to be easy tracking many of these Nigerians, listening to their personal stories. But of course, there is a way in which you also do snowballing, you also do case studies to look at the story of these Nigerians in Manchester. But beyond the human, we also look at the objects. There are more than 40,000 objects from Africa in the Manchester Museum. These tell stories in diverse ways. Many of the Nigerian materials came in even before the human migrants, and apart from the first migrants, the slaves. So Africa Hub is bringing many of these items out of storage to confront the silences directly by expanding their histories and reconnecting them with communities. I have worked with them on this, and we are now also bringing out the objects from the buses, from the store in which they were stored. Many Nigerians will still get involved to help in identifying some of these objects. Of course, when you Google the Manchester Museum Africa Hub, you will see some of these objects, and there are thousands of them in the museum, in the store, in boxes that they have not been unboxed. They are there, and they tell their stories. They tell the stories of people. So Nigerians are now helping to identify some of these things to say, oh yes, this is Yoruba. This came from Oyo Empire. Oh, this came from so. So these are kind of things that the Nigerian diaspora is also helping to identify. And so also within the museum, well, I saw a particular leaves label Oyo Town. And then I was wondering why who was so interested in that, and that he or she brought it here to say, take this, I brought it from somewhere in your town, put it in the museum. So it's also in the museum. But beyond that, there are roots, barks, and leaves from the homeland. They have counters upon counters upon counters of all these traditional medicine. If you read the labels, you will be amazed at how efficacious some of these things were to the Europeans who came. They loved them, asked their native doctors to do a package for them, and then they brought it here. So these are some of the things that are already in the museum. They tell the stories. It's part of the Nigerian diaspora. It's a story that must be told, because at the end of the day, if you stop believing in our own local herbs, then of course, it's not good for our future, not for our image. And then talking about the diaspora, I was curious to say, okay, who was the first Nigerian to come to Manchester? You know, Google will also do a kind of search, crawl through the engine and give you information. And so the Google, if you Google who was the first Nigerian in Manchester, this is what will give you. David Emari, who arrived from Nigeria in the 1940s, is recognized as one of the pioneering members of the Nigerian community. But as scholars, I mean, this is a message. As scholars, we have to do what you call, we do it very well in history. We do what you call triangulation. You don't sit at your table and say, yes, I have the information, you sit, you are satisfied. As a historian, you cannot be satisfied with a unilinear approach. You have to make it multidimensional, ask other people, talk to other people, search for other documents, and that's what is going to happen in this Manchester project. So if you look at this online and yes, is this correct? Well, we have to look beyond Google, because this old woman is used as a figure to say, spend some time with your elders. Not everything is found on Google. So for the Nigerian Manchester story, it's not Google that we are going to sit down with. We have to talk to people, elderly people here, documents here, all sort of sources. And so stories about the diaspora. Many Nigerians in Manchester grew up learning about the stories of migration to settle and integrate into foreign cultures. So many of these stories refer to the need for a better life. You see a document that refers to 1959, talking about leaving Nigeria because the conditions were very bad. If conditions were very bad in 1959, what do you say about 2026? So it just tells you the more things change, the more they remain the same. So Nigeria has continued to undergo a series of changes and issues, and these are well documented in immigrant stories. So what are these stories? We are going to look at it, compare it with the contemporary, and then go back home to see what was the problem in 1959, where somebody said Nigerian condition was very bad. Let's see what it was all about. So the history of diaspora is also the history of Nigeria. It is also the history of communities back home. It is also the history of economic conditions back home. It is the history of social conditions back home. So it's not something that you can just use, look at in a single unilinear way. It's multidimensional. And so this is now between Google and this document. I have used the Thomas Bangbala collection, and it says Thomas came to Manchester in 1928 and fought for the rights of Black people. And I have seen documents where he actually he became a member of the Labour Party. He fought for the rights of Black people. He was a member of the unions. And so he did a lot of things. The documents are there and they testify to what he has done. And of course, that he came to Manchester in 1928. Okay, so Nigeria in Manchester and symbols of identity. Well, the pragmatic existence of the Nigerian community has depended to a large extent on the infusion of home-abroad interactions. So the diaspora is not tantamount to cultural erasure. It's not, and that's what is significant about the Nigerian diaspora. You still find faith, identity, and heritage coexisting. And that's why it's not easy to just write the story of humans alone without talking also about faith, about identity, about heritage. It gives you a clear picture of the Nigerian diaspora. So they have continued to retain their reverence for African cosmology and heritage, as well as social cohesion. So, even though the colonial disruption affected the culture and identity of indigenous Nigerians, the attempts to reclaim this, both in Nigeria and the diaspora, have remained extremely significant. So, it's not about the mere fact of living abroad alone. It's also about who we are, what we are, and what do we identify with. So it's a paradox that with many of these ethnic nationalities living abroad, they have continued to internalize their indigenous values and culture and have used this template to navigate their way in a globalized world. And we are going to see that, although I will end very soon, we are going to see that in the larger work, when we begin to look at the case histories, tell personal stories, look at the issue of leadership and inclusiveness, look at bonds of diaspora, bonds of home, look at outreach and community work, and looking at aging and solidarity. Well, as I've told you, the work is in the future. It is loading, and I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prof, for taking us through memory lane, but also taking the time to do the needed, groundwork to help us understand and appreciate the robustness and the global character of Nigerian diaspora, not just in contemporary time, but to also highlight all the issues that are essential or that are also being ignored, in the broader thinking and planning, that's currently ongoing in Nigerian context. And this is also important because the current national policy or that's shaping the foreign policy of Nigeria also has Nigerian diaspora integrated into this. And if we are going to do serious work, and a holistic one at that, that is whole society in frame, we have to consider all the various dimensions. So right now, we want to not just appreciate you, but also now invite questions from the audience. Please, we encourage that you put your questions in the comment section. We'll take a couple of live questions as well, so you can indicate by raising your hands. But to get us started, Prof, I'm curious. I have a couple of questions that I think we can get started on, and the first one has to do with to get your opinion about the extent to which you think, or that the extent to which you would say that our current national diaspora framework is ahistorical. To what extent would you say this is the case? That is the first one. And secondly, when you talk about this grand strategy, this grand strategy that we must embrace, that we must articulate, what would this grand strategy look like from your perspective? So would like you to respond around this, and then we'll begin to collate further questions, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, like everything we do in Nigeria, we always assume that history is a useless subject. That is why it is not always factored into anything we do in history. And I have gone to meetings, even federal government meetings, where they begin discussions, and I draw their attention to say, no, what you are talking about has no basis in reality. And they tell you, yeah, this is the way it's done in the UK. That is the way. I say, yes, that's the way it's done in the UK. But these people factor their own history and culture into whatever they do. But in Nigeria, we never do. We never do. And so if you are going to talk about the diaspora framework in Nigeria, what are you leveraging it on? And of course, I'm sure it's going to be on the contemporary. Oh, our boys are doing well all over the world. This is the amount we make from remittances, which is short-sighted. It's very, very short-sighted. And that is the one that takes us into the grand strategy. Nigeria as a country has no grand strategy. I have always been saying it. And people tell me, oh, yeah, there are strategies. I say, strategy is different from grand strategy. Any country without a grand strategy, you know, has no strategy, because that strategy you are talking about itself is part of that grand strategy. You begin to wonder why Iran is fighting a major war and there is still electricity, which means there are layers and layers and layers of what has to be done. You know, so these are issues. Well, in Nigeria, we don't have one. If NEPA takes light, everybody is useless. I mean, before I left, I will sit in my office 2-3 days. There is no electricity. How can that happen? And yet you want us to publish in mainstream journals. You want us to be visible. Yes, we are doing that, but with our blood. And then of course each year the promotion guideline changes. So people are going to start dropping dead, of course. These are issues that we must begin to articulate and aggregate in national planning. And so when you then ask, what is grand strategy? If you want to know, because I always believe in giving practical examples, go and Google and read the grand strategy of Israel, the grand strategy of the United States, the grand strategy of China. In China, when it was at the height of the Cold War, the grand strategy of China was one-line binding. That is, whatever happens to the Soviet Union happens to us. So they were in agreement, they were working together, one-line binding. But when they fought, they changed the grand strategy. Today, the grand strategy of China is what it calls peaceful rising. And when we use cliches in Nigeria, Vision 2010, Vision 2030, all these ones are just mere noise. It's not a grand strategy. And so today, the grand strategy of China is peaceful rising. And within that peaceful rising, you have friendship with all countries of the world, including the United States. You have the Belt Road. You have a lot of things within that grand strategy. So it's not just a road strategy. No, it is a grand strategy in which that road and belt initiative will speak to security, will speak to international relations. We even speak to local consumption, because from belt and road, you bring in materials to be consumed locally. That's grand strategy. And so grand strategy simply is the highest level long-term plan that coordinates all available means. You won't say we are talking about military alone, or talking about diplomacy alone, or talking about diaspora alone, or talking about information alone. No. Everything must be brought together to work together at the same time, pari passu, within a grand strategy to achieve national interest and security. But today, we are fighting Boko Haram. Tomorrow, another group emerges. Let us establish a grand strategy to say, okay, in the past, we know, I don't know what happens now. When we were undergraduates, what is SSS now was NSO. NSO will be embedded, although I'm sure they are still doing it, will be embedded within our classrooms. So they know who is who. They listen to all of us. They participate. You come into the same class at 100 level, you graduate at the same time 400 level, even though he's not going to take a certificate, but he's there. So why are we not infiltrating Boko Haram? Why are we not infiltrating our neighbors? NSO used to have agents in all West African countries. So what is happening? In fact, there is a Briton who was in Nigeria in the 1960s who was asking me and said, what happened to your special branch? Nigeria used to have the special branch, which I think was part of the police before it was pulled out to create NSO. He said, what happened? Because the special branch was exceedingly efficient. But the same thing with, even when we were growing up, the CID. Where are all these things? They are no longer there. And it's just marks of a country without the grand strategy. everything we teach in the university system is now tailored towards something. And then when you finish teaching them, they run away. So where is the grand strategy that will hold all these things together? It's not there. You know, so that's the problem. Yes, the diaspora initiative or framework must be included within an effective grand strategy and must not be a standalone framework.
Thank you very much, sir. The next question will come from Tobe Nelly. I would like Tobe to unmute himself and ask you his question directly. Tobe.
Sure. Thank you, Doc. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So, Prof, good to see you again. And thank you so
much. Nice to see you.
after a very long time.
Yes, I can actually date you before the beard and after the beard.
Oh, really? You know how I started.
Yeah.
Anyways, very good to see you, sir. And I'm really pleased to be part of this conversation because I think it's really important that you are someone like you is leading it. I'm currently doing some work around how Nigerians in the UK are negotiating their relationship with Nigeria through everyday social, political, and economic practices, increasingly mediated by digital technologies. And one of the things that has come out quite often is the issue of precarities, issues around people's daily struggles, issues around uncertainties, and how it shapes their migration experiences, whether it's before they left the country or while they are in the country, or even at some point when they are forced to leave the country for different reasons. I mean, you've made a point now about how the local situation in the country at the moment is giving people that heartache and discomfort. Even when people hold British passports, they still struggle to call the place Britain home. So my question is, how do you see precarity shaping historical experiences, especially for those and identities of Nigerians in Manchester? And if you think it's relevant, do you think it's a central factor in this history? And how would you approach it or capture it in your research?
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I have explained that even in the census, you have Nigerians born in Nigeria and Nigerians born to Nigerians here. But of course, their identity in the census figure is Nigerians born in the UK. It's a different category.
Yeah.
And so with that kind of identity, they see themselves as less Nigerians than their parents. You know, even though their parents have taught them to eat eba, to eat amala. Yes, they love that. But when it comes to going back home, we have seen a couple of them who have come back home for NYSC. So one cannot generalize about this. But I will say it also depends on your understanding of the condition when you left. I met a Nigerian in Boston years ago, before things were this bad. And so we met on the streets and we started talking, and he told me he came in, actually, he went to Switzerland first, then from Switzerland, he came into the US. So I was asking him, so when are you likely to visit Nigeria again? He said, never. Yeah. There are these kind of people to say, well, they see they are coming out of Nigeria as an escape. So in that case, you must also understand the push and pull factors. There is no way you can do this work without looking at the push and pull factors, because that will also affect the narrative of whomever you are speaking with. And so, yes, living this kind of existence, I was watching do I call it a video or news item yesterday? We are the children of two children of the same parents, a young guy and a young girl, were appealing that the boy says he's a homosexual and the girl says she's a lesbian, and that they escaped from Nigeria. Now the girl has been granted stay on the basis of that. She's going to likely, of course, be punished in Nigeria. and the boy is still waiting, appealing to everybody to help him with his stay, because they will punish him for being a homosexual. It's children of the same parents.
Penultimate only when there is at the point of stress assignment, there is an extra syllable at the extra syllable. You have a penultimate high. So you either have a high.
Sorry, you need to unmute Prof.
Yes, I'm trying to do that. Prof, I'm asking him to unmute.
Okay, I've done so.
Yes. All right.
Yeah. So the condition of living is also very important to what you are looking for. So you just don't brand everybody as a migrant and then put them in the same bowl to say, yes, no. You have to understand where they are coming from, why they left, and then, of course, their target here. Because some of them are quite interesting. They are only target migrants. Oh, once I make this amount, I'm sending money back home. I'm building event centers. Once I have two, I'm going back home. So, but some, even if they make all this money in the world here, still don't want to go back home, especially with the news coming out of Nigeria, people being kidnapped. And we have seen so many people who have come home to establish ventures who have been kidnapped and killed. So within the context of that grand strategy that I'm talking about, we have to rework everything together. Well, why would I come to my country and be afraid to go out? So it's beyond politics. It's beyond governance. It's something that has to be looked at in totality. And the central factor in all this is that those who have migrated for a particular reason, and they have a target. So you have to look at the reason, you have to look at the target. So once you do that, it becomes clearer how to deal with the issue.
Thank you very much. Target migrants. Very important concept. I think we're running away with that. It's a good way to capture this kind of like decisive, so like a target-oriented exploration of the world. There's a question that came in from Olaiwola Kudus, and is asking that you mentioned that there are more than 40,000 objects from across Africa in Manchester Museum. He's asking the question, could you shed more light on this, please? How did this come to be?
Well, I have worked with the museum on these objects. I have seen them. I have seen the boxes in which they were kept. In fact, it's one of the reasons why they have just inaugurated the Africa Hub. To say it's only the African materials that are still locked up in the boxes in the store. So these objects came via the people who came to Africa, either as colonial officials or tourists or people buying objects from our own people. The fear of some of the objects being returned now is that they will be relooted and sold again. I mean, if you look at the story of Ife Museum, almost all at some point, I don't know what it is now, at some point, almost all the objects were stolen and sold out to the outside world. So, but these ones, some of course were stolen, like the elephant tusk was taken during the British invasion of the Benin Palace. Of course, that one is there. Some were brought, and then, of course, families would deposit. If the man who brought it or the woman who brought it from Africa is dead or is dying, the children don't want it. They just donate it to the museum. So, but one thing about these objects is that they have labeled where many of them came from. And then they have given us the names of people who donated them to the library, to the museum. So information is there. But what they now want us to do is to say, these objects came from Nigeria because that's the most label that you have in many of these objects. Adesina, please, could you help us? This object, this particular object, yes, we know it's from Nigeria, but which of the ethnic groups does it belong to? So that is what we are doing now. And so we are likely to also ask for more hands. Well, the Igbo group has done a lot about this because they are very strong here. So they have gone into the museum, they have been invited into the museum to help identify which are the Igbo objects. And so they have done that. And so that's why when you look at the Africa Hub today, the strongest part of the Africa Hub is the Igbo part of it, because they have helped to identify this. But by and by, we'll get all the other things done. But the long and short of it is that they were donated by those who came to Africa. Yeah.
So there's a triple barrel question from James Kehinde at Deleke, and the first question is asking is about in what ways have immigration policies in the UK shaped the settlement of Nigerians in Manchester? And then the second one is about how do Nigerian migrants contribute to local economy and cultural diversity in Manchester? And the final one, what roles do remittance play in sustaining families and communities in Nigeria? These are really broad questions with I'm sure we can't address everything here, but I don't know if you want to make some comments on that.
Well, let me first of all talk about remittances. We all do remittances. And so the only way you won't do remittances now is if you shut down your phone permanently. Because we still get messages, even unsolicited, from people you don't know to say, we have not eaten since last week, which is a minor remittance if you say, but of course there are consistent ones that goes to family, that goes for projects. All these things are there. They are very important. In fact, they are now really very they are really now very central to the Nigerian economy. But what I'm saying is, yes, it is very central, but it is also making some people very lazy. They will be waiting for the next remittance for next month, so they are not doing anything. And so somebody has told me to say all the people she was sending money home to, when she came home for burial, she discovered that they were better dressed than her. So she was going to revise her remittance policy.
Remittance policy.
Yeah, there's remittance policy at personal level, at family level, And so with that, she said, no, things have to change. Yeah. And then the local migrants have contributed very much to their host communities. We have evidence. Like the Thomas Bank I talked about. In fact, the Red Cross had to give him a certificate for donating blood consistently for over 20 years. Than that he has saved so many lives. So they gave him a certificate. Of course, we also have shops. We have different programs. And so you then find even within the officials of the council or the city, Nigerians, high Nigerian officials within these places. And so they have actually they have identified very much with their local community. And so they are very important. And then immigration policies in the UK. Well, Britain does whatever Britain wants. Today you have money that you pay for health surcharge. You pay this amount for this thing, you pay that amount for that. And so every day, and they are surprised that every day that they shift the figures, Nigerians are still paying. And so perhaps that's the reason why they also change it every time. To say, if you call it 1 million, Nigerians will pay. And yes, it will reduce the population of Nigerians coming, but the immigration policy itself, under the present regime says, yes, we don't want migrants again. And in Manchester last week, there was still a strong anti-immigrant rally, and it's growing every day, everywhere, And so any any party that wants to win now has to have a careful policy on immigration. So it's not only affecting party politics, it is affecting the economy because they believe the migrants have taken over all their jobs. And so they are not renewing the COS of Nigerians any longer. So Nigerians are being sent back home in droves, which is also going to affect remittance. If somebody who has been sending money home for 10 years because they didn't renew his or her visa is told to go back home, is going to come back home a disgruntled person. And so the Nigerian government must be careful. The number of people coming back home very unhappy is getting higher. And then they come home, there's no work for them. It's a big problem. And so the British government, like I said, does what it wants. It is left for our governments back home to also begin to understand the dynamics. Because somebody who has lived in a country with good security, good water, good electricity, has money to buy things in supermarkets, suddenly get back home, and then there's no electricity, there's no water, and then somebody came to also kidnap him and told the family to bring 50 million. These are issues. And so I'll still say it again. We must all sit down together to establish a grand strategy that takes everything on board to understand what we have to do. Look at Cuba. Yes, Cuba has a bad, poor economy, not because it wants to have a poor economy, but because of the United States. But still, it's training doctors that have been factored into foreign policy. Look at during COVID, when Italy had a problem, they sent for Cuban doctors, or whether Cuban doctors volunteered to come. And once their plane landed, Italians gathered at the airport and started clapping for them. So these are the kind of things that countries do to ensure that they remain prominent in the scheme of things. When we were younger, Nigeria was a country to reckon with. But now, and there's nothing like patriotism, there's nothing like national interest. Everything is just everything. We just wake up and sleep every night. The country sounds more like Ulysses Madi's book, No Past, No Present, No Future. But it's not like that. It's just for us to articulate what we have into a significant hub to ensure that Nigerians begin to identify again with the purpose or with the reason there of the country. What's the reason for Nigeria's existence? Nobody knows any longer. We have to go back to that.
Thank you, sir, for the very insightful response. There's in your talk, there's a lot of reflection on material culture, particularly artifacts and all of these other elements that are donated, and the way that it shaped the nature of connections, or the way we interpret the connections that existed between Nigeria, home and abroad, and particularly the city of Manchester, as it were. So a question came regarding this material culture, particularly in terms of fashion. So this question is coming from Moses and is asking you, to what extent is the Nigerian indigenous fashion culture a litmus of the Nigerian cultural identity in Manchester? So now, material culture, how is this manifesting? But particularly if you reflect on the historical context of your work, what did we see? What is happening now?
Well, part of the things that we also have within the Manchester Museum has to do with the fabric, local fabric of Nigerians, of Africans. It's also there. And so you could really date back what kind of dresses they wore in those days. You know, many of even the early migrants left behind some of these things we are talking about, their shoes, their combs, you know, they are there in the museum. And so it's something that is indicative of the need to preserve our culture, our identity. And so even within the contemporary context, you begin to see that, yes, you may wear coat and tie, but in most cases, especially on Sundays, Nigerians wear their indigenous dresses to church.
Mm.
You know, you find all this all over the place. You know, no threat, no being looked down upon to say you are local. No, no, everybody is, well, a large percentage of those who wear it are very happy to do so. And of course, it's part of the identification with home. And so the home consciousness is very strong, whether in material culture or in food culture or even in language. It's very strong. And so it's very significant for us to look at the home abroad interface. People have continued to relate. So it goes both ways. It's significant, yes.
Yes, sir. I want to quickly bring you back to circle back a little bit to the health context, and I'm agreeing with Ineke Udegbe, who said that is particularly intrigued to learn that there are documented pieces of Nigerian indigenous medicine preserved in museum in Manchester, and something that he was not aware of. So I'm seeing this in the context of this fauna and all of these other plants transportation. So this is for me, indicative of the so-called what I could call environmental condition of the Nigerian diaspora. And what in your own intellectual agenda, what does this going to look like, for you, given the kind of research that you're about to embark on right now? What does it open up? What are the possibilities? Particularly because a lot of our graduate students are here and, want to also open their mind, around issues of this kind.
Well, the thing that is very significant about this is to also look at the role of fauna and of course heritage in the diaspora stream. It's very important. As I've just said, it's not about the people alone. How can you talk about the people without talking about their health? Without talking about their consciousness? Is it the consciousness that determines their being, or is their being that determines their consciousness? These are the kind of things that we must begin to understand, to look out for. What makes you a Nigerian? Is it when you wear Nigerian dress alone? Or when you also understand the significance of the herbs? And you still find people talking here about, oh, why don't you use a herb for him or her? So it's that consciousness. Yes, you go to the hospital, but I am sure, well, I have not seen it, but I'm sure in their homes, there will be those who have brought herbs from Nigeria in plastic bottles, and they would have been told how to mix it and use it. So it's there. It's there. That consciousness has not gone away. It's something that lives with us. And when I was giving a talk at the museum when the Africa Hub was being opened, I told them that you have started setting up the objects, and that there is no way you can set up the objects and take the flora aspect or fauna aspect of it so far away. No, it's part of a whole. It must be like David Diop said, the dead are not dead. They live in the street, in the stream. They live in trees. They live in water. That's the African consciousness.
Mm.
So when you set up anything that belongs to Africa, that consciousness must radiate in everything you curate.
Mm. Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir. There's a bit of interest for me around this issue of inclusion and exclusion. What gets included in diaspora thinking and the framework. You spoke about the students, who are all the students who are being, and then they focus, on the professionals. So from the work you are doing, which communities, in Manchester, for instance, do you think are being excluded in Nigerian current policy thinking? And when we talk about the Nigerian condition in this context, whose condition are we talking about, given the heterogeneous, the complex, and the intersecting nature of the ways that Nigerian diaspora itself, the global Nigerian diaspora, is constituted today?
Well, the Nigerian condition that I was referring to there is not the condition of Nigerians here.
Mm.
It's the Nigerian condition that sent them out. And so you can't tell me that, we have a high population of Yorubas because they are more hungry than the Igbos. The Nigerian condition is, what is the push factor? What is pushing them out of the country? In a situation in which the professional earns 1 million a month, and already over 400,000 has gone on fuel in a month, it's a push factor. I knew of a Nigerian professor who comes here periodically to do care. To augment what she earns at home. And it's not because what she earns is not alone for her, but don't forget that we are a communitarian people. There is no way you can eat whatever you are eating alone. So I'm sure it's a culture of preservation. They look at you in my neighborhood and say, oh, you have 2 cars, then you must be rich. Forgetting that I have to go to work, my wife has to go to work separately out of town. But because you use 2 cars, they think you are rich. It's not like that. So when they come knocking on my door and you say you don't have, they look at you and say, are you mad? How can you say you don't have when you use 2 cars? They don't even want to know whether you borrowed to fuel those cars, which is what everybody goes through now. Even during the ASU strike, they were still knocking on my door. Didn't you hear that we are on strike and we are not being paid? Of course, they don't want to hear stories. So these are the kind of things that are part of the push to say, okay, you look at your existence and say, so how am I going to break even? There is the extended family, there is the extended people that are not family, there are the workers in your faculty or university that are also pulling you because they think you are better off, and so at times you could just get fed up and say, what life is this? And so you also run abroad, but you are not left alone. You still continue to get messages. So it's the Nigerian condition I'm talking about. And that's why I said, what is the Nigerian condition? Because the document I read was talking about the Nigerian condition in 1959. What's the Nigerian condition? So what is condition to me might be different from what is conditioned to you. And so you still have to talk to the diaspora people to say, what was the Nigerian condition when you were living? And how do you see things now? And in what ways do you think you can contribute to ameliorating that condition? Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir, for your response. There's also we have like group of, we call it group of questions from Inyene. So I don't know if Inyene wants to get on the speaker to ask these questions. Inyene, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, good morning. Thank you very much for this. Thank you, Prof. Adesina.
Thank you.
So I typed them in, but I think they're really long, so I'd just rather read them.
That's
So
that's
I
that's
was
part of the Nigerian condition.
Okay, so there are kind of three questions that, three different questions. So the first one is about the Africa Hub project at
Yes.
the Manchester Museum. So I was asking, how are you and the team ensuring, or how do you ensure that the Nigerian artifacts at the museum are correctly identified by the people or group from which they stem, to the end that misrepresentation, misattribution, and ultimately heritage site erasure or silencing does not occur? Because there might be some artifacts from a sort of group. Professor Senayon recently presented a talk on invisible minorities. I think that was the topic. So there's some minorities that people
Yeah.
may not see off the face of it, and then but if people are not there to say, oh, this is from this group,
Yeah.
what then happens? So that's the first question. And then the
Okay.
second one is, could you kindly speak? You spoke a little bit about political participation of Nigerians in Manchester, even from as far back as the 50s and 60s. And that's interesting to me because I'm interested in that. So I was asking, would you say that Nigerian identity, maybe in your studies, maybe not in this study, but in your general studies, would you say that Nigerian identity is leveraged as a political tool or something like it by Mancunian politicians of Nigerian heritage? So maybe when they go, are they using their identity as a way to like curry favor from the large Nigerian politician, or identifying as minorities, or I'm Nigerian, so you should vote for me, that sort of thing? And then the last one is, in your studies of the historical relationship between Nigeria and Manchester, this is just out of interest. Is it possible that you found anything about affinities to Nigeria developed by Mancunians of non-Nigerian heritage? So maybe white British people from Manchester who become affiliated to Nigeria, Nigerian culture, and then maybe even visit or migrate to Nigeria, especially in the contemporary time and in a globalizing world. So thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your very interesting questions. Let me start with the last one. People from Manchester developing affinity with Nigeria. Yes, I would say yes. One of those who actually helped them to develop the Faculty of Pharmacy in Bakumi Awolowo University is actually a professor from Manchester. So historically, yes, we have related. And even in UI, I know there was one person who came from Manchester, I think to the social sciences or so. I will confirm. But of course, beyond that, we have those who come occasionally for research and then have loved the country. And so they love the country, and so they go back occasionally for vacation. But I have not heard, I'm not saying that they don't exist. I've not heard about those who have identified with their country, with the country, and have changed their nationality to be naturalized as Nigerians. I'm sure along the way we'll find those ones, because I only found the one who helped them to establish pharmacy in Ife by accident. I wasn't looking out for him. So these are things that I think are likely to be still embedded in documents. It's difficult working with documents. And so when we sit down at times critiquing some people's work to say, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, we don't take note of the volume of materials that we have had to sift through. Number one, you have to think about the funding. Number two, you have to think about the time. Number three is the resources. Do you have the resources to work on these things? So these are issues. And so when next you do a critique, know there are fundamental issues, challenges that would delay us from getting what we want. And that's why I said in history, there is no total history. you can stop somewhere and somebody else will look at your work and determine the lapses or the things that are not there and then start from there. So it's really very important for you to know that we don't have total history. And so that's very significant. You continue from where I start from. Well, on the political participation of Nigerians in Manchester, yes, they leverage on their Nigerian identity. And I will go back again, to Bangbala. He was one person who documented the fact that in 1959 also, some thugs in Salford, Manchester, wanted to chase out Black people from Manchester in 1959, which is still what I told you that last week, they still demonstrated that Black people must go. There are records that in 1959, there were thugs in Salford who wanted all Blacks out of Manchester. And then the response of Bangbala was that, they don't even know that we are as British as they are because we are under British rule, even though we are Nigerians. And so they didn't discriminate against him as a Nigerian working in offices or as a member of the trade unions. No, he became an official who was also representing the council. So he did so not as a Briton, but as a Nigerian, but as a protected subject. So there are these categories that were in place. And it was also when I was working on this that I discovered that his actual first passport was actually obtained from the Gold Coast as a British protected citizen subject. So there are a lot of things you begin to see when you go through this kind of work. And then, of course, on the Africa Hub, the artifacts are there, yes. How do we ensure that they are correctly identified? We try our best, because there is no way you can say definitely or definitively. They'll say, this one is a gala. And then it turns around to say, because they are neighbors to the Jokun, perhaps they share certain things and it turns out to be Jokun. What do you do? So anything short of you flying in people to say, come and identify, of course, there will be room for mistakes. Even medical doctors forget things inside patients. That's a life matter. Not to talk of those things that have been there for years. And then, but at the Institute of African Studies, I remember that there was a music that had been recorded and kept in the African Studies. It was because that thing was there that the people, I think it's from Benue State, were able to come back to say, let's listen to that music because it seems we have lost the original lyric. So something or sound or something. So it was the Institute of African Studies that saved them. So if they don't have it, then the new generation will not know that the tune or the lyric was different from what was original. So the same thing with these objects. There are some that will be able to identify definitely to say, yes, this is Yoruba. But when they then ask me, is it Ijebu or is it Oyo? That's where the problem is. So it's going to be a painstaking process to identify it. And I've suggested to them to bring together a group of scholars from all over Africa. Then we begin a process of meeting via Zoom, showing them these objects to say, is there any way in which you can identify this object? Because we can't just fly everybody here to say, come and help us identify this object. So the closest we can do is to look at it via Zoom. So we are hoping that we'll be able to represent everybody very well. And then, of course, it's a very painstaking task.
So, sir, thank you very much. There's a very important question here in the comment section, which I'm going to come back to after this very next one. And that's the question I want to ask now will take you back to the controversy or the anti-black protest of 1959 that you cited. We know that from the work of people like Lynn Claire, who worked a lot on Nigerian seamen during before during the decolonization and then for early post-colonial period, and she worked a lot around how some Africans, particularly Nigerians, decided to identify with Nigerian identity and all of that, and all the baggages that came with that. So I'm wondering, from your work so far within Manchester, whether there are indications of this confused consciousness, and decision making or nationalism decision making for Nigerians who were caught, between deciding whether they want to be British or Nigerians, at independence.
Well, these things are a matter of negotiating your identity at particular periods. We are very good at that, even today. I am just speaking from Ikwetumodu, but my mama was Ijebu, and so I can conveniently tell people if it's going to serve a purpose for me to say, oh yes, my mama was Ijebu. So they begin to also identify with you to say, well, it's one of us. But I'm sure in those days, something like that will also happen. They would negotiate their identities depending on what was at stake. Could it be in your interest today to identify as full Nigerian because they are saying, oh, they are giving diaspora people something? Or would it be in your interest to identify today as British because it is in your better interest to identify as British? So as humans, we negotiate our identity. And so I'm sure in those days it also happened. But one thing I saw with Bangbala, who came in since the 1920s, was until he died. Well, maybe later, but the last visit he made home in the late 1960s, he still made it with his Nigerian passport. Because his Nigerian passport is in his document. So it's really very interesting that today it's a status symbol to have two passports, but prefer to show everybody your British passport because you think it's more important than the Nigerian passport. So it's legitimate to negotiate your identity, but I have not seen instances where people disavowed their Nigerian identity in favor of the British. Perhaps as we go along, we'll see that one. As I've said, this is still a work in its embryo.
Okay, sir. It's been great conversation thus far, but I wouldn't want to close it up without asking this very important question that has just been raised by Osinachi Ezima. Of course, while thanking you for the presentation, he talked about how you've spoken quite eloquently about the organization, the structure of the Igbo diaspora in Manchester. So he's asking, to what extent do you find the Biafran consciousness significant in their organization, formidability, and strength? He also asked, do you find it heavily manifest? And to what extent do you think that their heavy presence in Manchester has something to do with the response to the high surveillance on them in Nigeria? Finally, he's asking, do you find a distinction between the larger diaspora of the Igbo people and Biafran identifying people in Manchester?
Well, I hope you can see this. A program by the Igbo community in 2019. Can you see what I'm raising?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, and so on page 22, one of the themes is about Biafra.
Mm.
Can you see it?
Yes, remember Biafra
Okay.
historian invitation.
Yes. So it's a consciousness. You cannot banish the Biafra consciousness. It's not possible. It's a story that is told and retold, and of course, told to the children, even though there are embellishments. And because as a historian, I listen to some of the stories and I know that some of these things have been embellished. But basically, anywhere you have Igbos, they are well organized, they are creative, and they are supportive. So you can't deny them that. It's the same thing here. And ever since I came, it's been the most visible organization that I have seen. And I've also told you that even the hub that we are creating, they have established the Igbo presence profoundly in the hub. So if other groups can also do their own, we are happy. But you cannot then blame the Igbos for establishing their own. Are they stopping you? You know, so it's a consciousness that is healthy, but in other instances, it could be domineering to others because then you are excluded from what they are doing. But once they are not saying, don't do your own, then of course, leave them to do what they want to do. And so, yes, it's a very formidable association, well organized. And so my wish is that all other groups will come together like that and then stay formidable. Yeah. But I cannot date how or when they began to migrate here until we do research, talk to them, interview them. These are some of the things that, because you find that some of them actually came here during the Civil War. And then ask some of them, have you been back to Nigeria ever since then? Then they're likely to say no. So there are issues that I've said it's a large topic. And so it's painstaking. It's going to be very slow, but it's going to be done.
Thank you very much, sir. I think we can all appreciate Prof for a very healthy and provocative conversation that we've had in the last hour or more. It's been really insightful. It's been mind opening, and I don't think we could have expected anything less. We've even gotten so much than we anticipated. So as we are coming to the end of this session, I would like to express sincere appreciation to everyone. First of all, to our speaker, Professor Olutayo Adesina. Thank you for a deeply engaging and intellectually stimulating talk. Your insights have not only enriched our understanding of Nigerian diaspora histories, it has also opened up important avenues for further research. And we are taking this seriously at the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center here at the University of Ibadan. Of course, we thank the director of the center, Professor Olutayo Oluwatoyin, for his leadership and opening remark. And then also the vice chancellor of the university, Professor Adebayo, for his continued support for this center. Our appreciation also goes to Nigerian in Diaspora Commission and the chairman CEO for ensuring that this initiative comes to light. The Institute of African Studies for enabling and facilitating the arrival of this center. And of course, to TETFund, the principal funder of the African Diaspora Resource and Research Center, which designated the center as TETFund Center of Excellence for Diaspora Studies, we are really thankful. So we thank all the participants for joining us and for your active engagement. Now, we are going to be encouraging you to sort of visit our website to learn more about our programs and activities. Also, subscribe to our newsletter through the ADRRC website. And don't forget to follow us across all social media platforms where we'll also be sharing updates. And then finally, we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, where the recording of this session and subsequent sessions will be uploaded for wider access, allowing you to view and rewatch and watch again. So this brings to the end of our inaugural seminar, and thank you again, and we look forward to welcoming you in the next edition of the ADRRC monthly seminar. Thank you all, and thank you, Prof, for your time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so
And bye
much.
for now. Until next time.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Bye. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you so much, Prof.
Yes.
Maybe some kind of ritual closing remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the center, I would like to thank everybody, and particularly our inaugural lecturer, Professor Olutayo Adesina. I feel particularly relieved because his lecture looks like an extension of our Diaspora and Transnational Studies classes. So we're in the early sessions, the first thing we tell the students is that we are not here just for human migration. You can't do human migration without taking into consideration the non-human migration. And Prof has just dealt with that in a demonstrably persuasive way. We are so honored, we are so privileged, and we will always come back to you for further inspiration and leadership. Thank you all, and bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
And all the best with the center.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you very much, sir.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.